Better? Okay. Let's begin with a word of prayer. Leon, would you mind wording that?
Our Father, we thank Thee for so many things that we need to be humble and recognize that You are so holy. Help us in our study today. Help the teacher to remember what he's going to say and get his points across. Help us to listen and understand and help us to learn. Help us to do all to Thy glory. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen. So this morning, of course, we are in John 16. John 16. We have been working our way over the past few sessions through this, what is sometimes called farewell discourse of Jesus. This extended conversation that he has with his disciples. So this morning we come, of course, as we said, to John 16. As always, we will read this aloud. I would like for us, given the nature of what we're going to talk about this morning, I would like for us to get a bit of a running start. So I'm going to have us begin at chapter 15 and verse 18, and then we will read all the way through 16. Can I get a volunteer? Janet? Would you like to read it all? We can split it up, or you can take the whole thing. Take it away. Start at 15, verse 18.
If the world hates you, you know that it has hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love you as its own. But because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, because of this world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you, a slave is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you as well. If they followed my word, they will also follow yours. But all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know the one who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have sinned. But now they have no excuse for their sin. The one who hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works which no one else did, they would not have sinned. But now they have both seen and hated me and my Father as well. But this happened so that the word that is written in their law will be fulfilled. They hated me for no reason. When the Helper comes, whom I will send to you from the Father, namely the Spirit of truth, who comes from the Father, he will testify about me. And you are testifying as well, because you have been with me from the beginning. These things I have spoken to you, so that you will not be led into sin. They will ban you from the synagogue, yet an hour is coming for everyone who kills you to think that he is offering a service to God. These things they will do, because they have not known the Father nor me. But these things I have spoken to you, so that when the hour comes, you may remember that I told you of them. However, I did not say these things to you at the beginning, because I was with you. But now I am going to him who sent me, and none of you asked me, where are you going? But because I have said these things to you, grief has filled your heart. But I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I am leaving. For if I do not leave, the Helper will not come to you. But if I go, I will send him to you. And he, when he comes, will convict the world regarding sin and righteousness and judgment. Regarding sin, because they do not believe in me. And regarding righteousness, because I am going to the Father, and you no longer are going to see me. And regarding judgment, because the ruler of this world has been judged. I have many more things to say to you, but you cannot bear them at the present time. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all truth. For he will not speak on his own, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will disclose to you what is to come. He will glorify me, for he will take from mine and will disclose it to you. All things that the Father has are mine. This is why I said that he takes from mine and will disclose it to you. A little while, and you no longer are going to see me, and again in a little while, you will see me. So some of his disciples said to one another, what is this that he's telling us? A little while you're not going to see me, and again a little while you will see me, and because I'm going to the Father. So they were saying, what is this that he says, a little while? We do not know what he's talking about. Jesus knew that they wanted to question him, and he said to them, are you deliberating together about this, that I said, a little while, and you are not going to see me, and again a little while, and you will see me? Truly, truly, I say to you, that you will weep and mourn, but the world will rejoice. You will grieve, but your grief will be turned into joy. Whenever a woman is in labor, she has pain, because her hour has come. But when she gives birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish because of the joy that a child has been born into the world. Therefore, you too have grief now, but I will see you again, and your heart will rejoice, and no one is going to take your joy away from you. And on that day, you will not question me about anything. Truly, truly, I say to you, if you ask the Father for anything in my name, he will give it to you. Until now, you have asked for nothing in my name. Ask, and you will receive, so that your joy may be full. These things I have spoken to you in figures of speech. An hour is coming, when I will no longer speak to you in figures of speech, but will tell you plainly about the Father. On that day you will ask in my name, and I am not saying to you that I will request of the Father on your behalf, for the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me, and have believed that I came forth from the Father. I came forth from the Father, and have come into the world. Again, I'm leaving the world, and going to the Father. His disciples said, see, now you're speaking plainly, and are not using any figure of speech. Now we know that you know all things, and that you have no need for anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came forth from God. Jesus replied to them, do you now believe? Behold, an hour is coming, and has already come, for you to be scattered, each to his own home, and to leave me alone. And yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. These things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world.
Thank you. All right. So, if you were here Wednesday night, you heard an excellent presentation from Alan dealing with John 15. That makes, of course, 2 class sessions that we spent on John 15, which is a helpful reminder to us as we work through this gospel or through any other biblical text, that when we spend time in classes like this, the 45 minutes that we give to a chapter of John's gospel each time, we are more or less skimming the surface. We are rarely able to go into the kind of depth that is found in these texts. We could, if we wanted to, we could put 2 more class sessions toward John 15 and still not get there. So just a kind of a reminder in terms of what we do here, and then in terms of your own preparation. When you come into these classes, it's always helpful to have read these texts more than once before we begin our discussions. As we said a moment ago, John 16, we are continuing through this farewell discourse of Jesus's, and we are, as we read through this, of course, we come back around from in between a certain set of topics. So here, of course, we're dealing at the end of 15 with the hatred of the world, the reality of persecution. We are also, of course, dealing with the work of the Spirit. And the way that these things are laid out, there is some connection there between those 2 things. We are dealing with the growth, let's say, that we have witnessed in the disciples themselves. We're going to see some of that when we get into 16. We're going to see how the work of the Spirit is connected to that. And as we go on, of course, we're going to return to this idea of that we've seen before about Jesus's teaching methods, let's say. All right. As always, I bring things that I'm interested in talking about, and I'm sure you do too. So please jump in when you'd like to raise a question, when you'd like to make a point, etc., etc. Okay. So as we said at the end of 15, we turn to this idea of the hatred of the world. And we start there, of course, because the opening verses of 16 are intimately tied to that. Jesus has said that the world has hated him and that they, the disciples, will be hated in that same way. We have said that there is some talk about the reason for all this. All these things, chapter 15, verse 21, all these things but all these things they will do to you on account of my name, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not have been guilty of sin, but now they have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father also. So in other words, the work of Jesus, as we saw in John chapter 3, the work of Jesus is a work of exposure. His very existence, his very ministry, his very life on the earth illuminates the existence of sin. It illuminates the fundamental problems that the world finds itself in and is in need of rescue from. So then we come to the beginning of 16. He says, I have said all these things to you to keep you from falling away. They will put you out of the synagogues. Indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God. And they will do these things because they have not known the Father nor me. It's helpful to remember here something of the context of this gospel. We can't put an exact date on this, but we know that that all of the internal evidence points to the late first century, maybe sometime around the year 90, perhaps. At least that last quarter of the first century. And so when John writes this, part of what he's doing is looking around in his own day and reflecting back upon the things that Jesus said and how Jesus foretold the kinds of things that would happen. So in this particular regard, toward the end of the first century, we come to this time where obviously there's a great deal, even in Jesus' own day, but this intensifies. There is a great deal of hostility between the Jews and between the followers of Christ. But there's also, of course, the presence of the Romans here. And a lot of what we read here is kind of wrapped up in that history. Think for a second about what we tend to call the Jewish War, this invasion of Judea by Roman military forces, beginning in 66 and climaxing in 70 with the destruction of the temple and with the destruction of the city of Jerusalem. The Gospels, of course, point us to that event in ways that are very explicit and sometimes not so explicit. That is the opening, let's say, of a period of about 60, 65 years of intense hostility. And between the Jews and between those that came to be called Christians. Maybe we think about it this way. In the Roman view, and I want you to kind of put your Roman cap on for just a moment. In the Roman view, prior to this time, Christianity, as we think of it, was seen as a sect of Judaism, was seen as a subset of that. And that served a couple of purposes for the early church. The Romans, how would we express this? The Romans gave kind of special dispensation to the Jews, in a sense. They thought that Judaism was weird for a lot of reasons. That's the best way to express that. But at the same time, they respected it because it was, in their view, a very old religion. And for the Romans, anything that was, that had a certain amount of antiquity around it, anything that was old, was generally seen as honorable, even if you didn't yourself adhere to it or follow it. So what that meant was that the Jews were spared, by and large, were spared active, persecution from the Romans. Now you might be thinking, well, the Jews worship one God, and the Romans, of course, worship many gods, and they not only that, they are in this period coming to worship their emperor as a god. Well, the Jews had a workaround, and the agreement was that the priests would offer prayers on behalf of the emperor in the temple, and therefore they did not have to burn the incense. They did not have to make other kinds of sacrifices to the emperor as a god. Christians benefited from this in those days, in the first century. But then after 70, after the Jewish War, there is the sentiment that is widespread among the Jews that in order for this not to happen again, there are certain aspects of the faith that have to be tamped down. So explicitly, if you have people running around talking about messiahs, talking about the formation of a new kingdom, in their view, that is a problem. In their view, that is, in order to not attract negative attention from the Romans, we want to get rid of that kind of stuff. And so from this point forward, Jewish leaders, Pharisees in particular, are very explicit with the Roman authorities that these people, these Christians, are not part of us and do not deserve the same consideration, do not deserve the same protections that we have. One of the things that occurs to kind of solidify that is this phenomenon of excommunication, we might say, withdrawal of fellowship, being expelled from the synagogues, and that is what, of course, John refers to here. It's a boundary marker. It's an effort to say these people are not part of us. These people do not belong to us. If you turn over your Bibles to Revelation, Revelation chapter 2 and 3, you'll see hints at this. Revelation 2, beginning at verse 8, this is the letter to the church in Smyrna. There's some evidence in the tradition that John had spent some time in Smyrna. It's neither here nor there. But anyway, beginning at verse 8, to the angel of the church in Smyrna write the words of the first and the last who died and came to life. I know your tribulation and your poverty, but you are rich, and the slander of those who say that they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. That phrase, synagogue of Satan, has been greatly debated, of course, but in this context, it's kind of easiest to see this as one of these instances where the Jewish synagogue in this town has enacted this kind of excommunication and is mistreating these people. Chapter 3, the letter to the church in Philadelphia, beginning at verse 7, and to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write the words of the Holy One, the true one who has the key of David, who opens and no one will shut, who shuts and no one opens. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, which no one is able to shut. I know that you have but little power, and yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. Listen carefully there. Of course, that is the in a context like this, that is the perhaps the key temptation that these believers that John is writing his gospel to faced. That was the temptation, as he puts it there in chapter 16, verse 1, the temptation to fall away, the temptation to give up. Verse 9, behold, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say that they are Jews and are not, but lie. Behold, I will make them come and bow down before your feet, and they will learn that I have loved you, etc., etc. So back to John 16. They will put you out of the synagogues, verse 2. Indeed, the hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God. So, of course, all these things are done from a perspective of being the more faithful follower to God. And they will do these things because they have not known the Father. That, of course, has been a continual theme in this book. You can think back to John 8. You can think back to John 9. Who really knows the Father? Who is more in line with the Father? Is it his Son? Or is it the leadership class, the religious leadership class in Israel in this day? And then finally he says, but I said these things to you, that when their hour comes, that is, when this time of persecution comes, that you may remember that I told them to you. So in other words, toward the end of the first century, when these kinds of things, when the Christian communities are experiencing these kinds of things, they can remember what Jesus said and how Jesus said that these are the sorts of things that would happen. Comments on any of that? Questions? Paul.
Well, the latter part of verse 2 about the time is coming when even Christians would be killed, and that would be a good thing. They would be honoring God by doing that. And, throughout history, there's been folks that carry that out. Now, it's going on today.
Mm-hmm. And they usually think they're doing the right thing.
Doing the right thing. And maybe as an opposite or counter to that, some folks don't want to sing hymns that has, like, soldiers of Christ arise, or the battle belongs to the Lord. They don't want to sing anything that has to do with a reference that might be considered military.
Yes.
So, you can go from one extreme to the other, obviously.
I think if I recall correctly, maybe within the last 10 years, PC USA went through a big argument about their hymnal. think Soldiers of Christ Arise was one of those songs that was being debated. Anyone else? Persecution is kind of a fraught question when we think about how to apply that in our own context. Because we look at this passage, we look at the end of 15, we look at chapter 16, and there's, of course, no dispute that the persecution comes for very clear, very specific reasons. And it comes because of their allegiance to Jesus as the Messiah, as the Son of God. There is also essentially a promise here on Jesus' part that if they follow him, they will experience persecution. Now we know, of course, that persecution takes many forms. It did in those days. It was not always openly violent. Sometimes it involved things like social ostracism. Sometimes it involved things like, let's say, handicapping your economic prospects. So, for example, in the cities of Asia Minor, those cities that the letters at the beginning of Revelation are written to, if you were in a trade, let's say you're a carpenter, let's say you're a stonemason, any other number of sort of critical trades, in order for you to make a living, in order for you to work, you would need to be a part of a guild, carpenter's guild, whatever it happens to be. And those guilds were, in those days, they were civic organizations, but they were also religious organizations. And to be a part of the guild, you would need to acknowledge your allegiance to the gods of the city, to the emperor, and so forth, so on and so forth. And that made it, of course, very difficult for believers to earn a living. So it's one example, not exactly violent. It's not exactly getting thrown to the lions, but it is it's persecution, and it is it's a challenge for them. Nonetheless, and you can imagine, of course, that in a situation like that, the temptation to fall away, to use John's language there, the temptation to give up is pretty strong. Jared.
There's such a rejuvenating aspect to having Christ with them, that the ire is more directed towards Christ, that he's there in the flesh with them. It's a very dynamic and active situation in which they're feeding off of him. And you can see this actually, if you just look through history in general, and you see, please don't take this the wrong way, but you see charismatic leaders or cults of personality or anything else typically do not outlive their central figurehead. Usually after the central figurehead dies, you end up having, fractionalization, and you end up having, infighting and whatever, the pressures of everything kind of come crashing down on the group that was following that person. So that seems to be human nature in some way. Christ is setting these men up for success, right? He is getting ahead of human nature, essentially, and preparing them to understand that stuff is going to happen. It's going to be bad, and I'm not going to be here. So get ready for it now, right? Go ahead and start planting the seed now, being prepared now, because it's going to be much more difficult. Even though he's with them in spirit, he's not with them in flesh. after I guess his ascension.
I think it's really interesting the way that he kind of addresses them. If you look at verse 4, verse 5, he openly says, I did not say these things to you from the beginning because I was with you. I think there's also kind of an understanding that at the beginning they weren't really able to handle it. But then you get, you go from there. Verse 7, verse 8, but if I go, I will send him to you. I will, it is, in fact, backing up just a bit, it is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the helper will not come to you. There is a sense in which they move from not getting it at all to maybe now where they are, to some extent, ready to stand on their own 2 feet. They are ready. There's this kind of gradual growth, gradual maturation that we see in them over the course of this gospel. But even so, come down to verse 12. Jesus says, I still have many things to say to you, but you cannot bear them now. So in other words, this process continues. This process keeps going. And even if they are to the point where they can understand certain things, and where he can promise them that the helper, the Spirit of truth, is going to come, there's still more. There's still more for them to understand. Anybody have anything else they want to talk about as far as persecution, as far as how we apply those words in our own context? Janet?
I think it's important for us to remember about the different levels of persecution and to not be surprised when things happen to us, but rather be expecting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we live in a society where we're not really, we're not going to get thrown to the lions. We're not going to be as Nero did. We're not going to be set on fire as tiki torches for a garden party. Tacitus tells that story. But there are other ways to experience this, and of course we want to be careful when we think about that, because we want to be sure that what we are experiencing is for the sake of Christ and not for maybe an extraneous reason. Yeah. All right. So as Jesus continues to speak, we turn, of course, to the Spirit of truth, the Helper, more directly. And he says, as we just saw, verse 8, and when he comes, that is, when the Spirit comes, he will convict the world concerning sin and righteousness and judgment. Concerning sin, because they do not believe in me. Concerning righteousness, because I go to the Father, and you will see me no longer. Concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world is judged. You might think there of Paul standing before Felix, Acts 24. It's not a direct quote of this, but it's pretty close. Acts 24. beginning at verse 24, after some days, Felix came with his wife Drusilla, who was Jewish, and he sent for Paul and heard him speak about faith in Christ Jesus. Of course, we're all, I think, familiar with this. And as he reasoned, that is as Paul reasoned about righteousness and self-control and the coming judgment, Felix was alarmed and said, "Go away for the present. When I get an opportunity, I will summon you," etc., etc. So the content of the message, we might say, just as Jesus pledges, so the disciples themselves enact. The content of the message is very much in line with this. We can also see that. B.W. Johnson points this out about Acts 2, that one way to read Acts 2 is, and Peter's sermon on Pentecost is as a sermon about these things, about righteousness and sin, and about the coming judgment. I think it's also interesting here that Jesus's eyes here are fixed on the future. That is to say that, we see confusion on the part of the disciples in this chapter. They don't know what "in a little while" means, right? There's still a lot of questions that they have. There's still a lot of uncertainties that they have. But Jesus, when he thinks about them, his eyes are fixed on the future. He is preparing them. As we said a moment ago, he's preparing them to stand on their own 2 feet, to proclaim the message that he has given them, to tell the world about who he is, to speak of sin, to speak of righteousness, to speak of the coming judgment. And I think that is, I think that's really, hopefully meaningful for us, because sometimes we can, when we read the Gospels, we can get hung up on just how clueless the disciples are at times. We can get hung up on the mistakes that they make in interpreting what Jesus has to say. But in the end, he does give them the message, and he gives them the Spirit of truth to go with them to proclaim the message. And of course, when we get to the book of Acts, when we get to the epistles, when we get to the letters that John, that are written to the churches, we see men who are very much standing on their own 2 feet, in the power of the Spirit, who are proclaiming the message. Other thoughts on that? Frank?
If you keep reading and down into verse 12, human frailty is acknowledged by the writer. I have many things to say, but you cannot bear them now. It's like talking to a teenager when you stop to think about it. You try to share all of your years of life that you have with your teenager, and they look at you like you said you kind of know. And here, you begin to see that the Spirit is what guides us to maturity. And now we see differently than we did even 10 years ago. We see differently because we've matured. And do this in our everyday life here. Parents keep their children from certain things because they're not ready to understand what's going on. So Jesus tells it, but he also says, you've got to grow and grow spiritually. And we owe it to ourselves to let the Spirit as he said back in 14, we need to be comforted by the Spirit, knowing that it is true. And even if we don't understand it, we should have the confidence, the faith that we need to endure the seeming frustration until we come to terms with it in our mind.
Very good.
Anyone else? Jesus continues to be concerned about time, let's say, and the passing of time. We see that in this chapter. At the very beginning, the hour is coming, etc., etc. And again here in verse 25, the hour is coming when I will no longer speak to you in figures of speech, but will tell you plainly about the Father. In that day, you will ask in my name, and I do not say to you that I will ask the Father on your behalf, for the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me and have believed that I came from God. Again, we see Jesus' emphasis on the future, on the passing of time, let's say, on a certain expectation that the disciples should be aware of. That they can't get stuck in their own circumstances, let's say. They can't get mired down in their own circumstances. They always need to be looking toward what is coming and looking at, as Jesus says elsewhere, looking at the signs of the times, let's say. So we wrap up this chapter with something we've seen in this gospel earlier, the way that Jesus presents his message, that many times it is veiled. Many times it is delivered in what the ESV here translates as figures of speech or figurative speech. But then sometimes, especially as we go on through this gospel, sometimes he is going to pull the veil back, and he is going to speak plainly. And he does that here, verse 28. I came from the Father and have come into the world, and now I am leaving the world and going to the Father. And of course, now they are at least somewhat ready to receive this. They understand that he is speaking plainly and not using, verse 29, not using figurative speech. They recognize that he knows all things. Of course, John has already told us that at the end of chapter 3. But now they see it. Now, at least they see it more plainly than they did before. And Jesus answered them. I've always kind of wondered what the tone of voice is here. Do you now believe? Behold, the hour is coming. There's that phrase again. The hour is coming. Indeed, it has come when you will be scattered, each to his own home, and will leave me alone. We're going to see that here very shortly. We're going to see it in the events of chapter 18. They will scatter. Jesus himself will be left alone to face his accusers. Then he says, yet I am not alone, for the Father is with me. I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Tribulation, what do we mean by that? Or maybe that whole phrase, in the world you will have tribulation. What are we expecting there? Yeah, persecution. A lack of understanding, right? Opposition of various kinds. But ultimately, it doesn't matter. He says, take heart. Let your sorrow, earlier in the chapter, let your sorrow be turned to joy. May your joy be full, because I have overcome the world. We'll hit chapter 17 on Wednesday night. Thank you.